Hello, good afternoon. Welcome everyone. Congratulations, it's about 2 weeks in the semester. 3 weeks, yeah, 3 weeks. So. You're counting the days, yes. 6? It feels like 6, right? Anyway, we have the pleasure of having Paul Condor today. He's a principal at Arcadis, based in New York. And Paul was supposed to come actually next week, but he had an urgent client meeting in London. In fact, he's leaving after this presentation. So I asked him to come a week before, and he was very generous enough to complete the presentation. And I'd also like to thank John Naranjo from RDKL. Where is John? Yes. John was the one who introduced us to Paul. And so thank you, John. So just a very quick introduction about Paul. Paul leads the global experience design practice serving retail, hospitality, and technology brands. His team's work is driven by research into human behavior, community engagement, design principles, and marketing insights. Paul has worked with global brands such as Ford, Starbucks, Nike, Caesars, and the city of Amsterdam. Before moving to New York in 2016, Paul was a principal in experience design at Lenati Consultants in Seattle. Previously, Paul taught industrial and digital experience design at Emily Carr University, the University of British Columbia, and Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. He has been awarded several of the top awards in the design industry, including Best of Neocon Gold, the CX Impact Award from the CXPA, and the Retail Design Institute's Store of the Year. His work has been featured on CBC Canada, TFI France, NBC News, Fox News, and CNN. So we are very honored to have Paul here, and the title of today's lecture is Nice Store, Does It Sell Anything? So Paul.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, I'm not going to be using a mic today, so anybody who's in the back, please feel free to come down. Might get a little quiet. This is about how loud I'm going to be talking. I do that because I don't like the experience of wearing a mic. I find that I talk quieter when I wear a mic, and I'm not as animated and not as much fun, and I want to be fun. So this is how we're going to do it today. My background originally is industrial design. I designed products. I was really focused a lot on furniture. I did some electronic stuff down in California. I'm from Canada and spent most of my career at that stage in Vancouver. And there's something that happened about 10 years ago where I realized that what we do in design, where we try to understand who a user is, what they do, what they want, what they aspire to, what pisses them off, all of that stuff, is really not something that you can avoid dealing with. You can't just deal with form. You can't just deal with making something beautiful. You got to deal with people. It's a very different question to ask, does something work, versus do you like it? Very different question. And I wanted to move away from the does something work world into also embracing the human aspect of it. And when you do that, things get really complicated because people are really unpredictable. So let's get started. We have a bit of a problem with the design professions, in my opinion. And the reason is that they are all aligned to 19th century manufacturing and production channels. My background's industrial design, which meant that I designed for manufacturing. I was very comfortable in places, well, not really look like that, maybe a little nicer, hopefully. And so I would come up to a client and I would say, I don't know what your problem is, but the solution is definitely a new chair. Because whatever I did, I had to manufacture it. And there's a reason that we do that to ourselves, and it's so that we can get to scale faster. Okay? So in the corporate world, after the Industrial Revolution, you silo into a whole bunch of different specialties and departments, and it's really important that the people inside those departments are completely replaceable. Okay? Well, lost 2 architects the other day. You know, terrible gardening accident or something, landscape architects. We got to get new architects in here. What are we going to do? Well, we hire 2 more. Just, I don't know, get me some resumes. They're exchangeable. Engineers are totally like that. Architects are a bit different because they have a star system. There's that sort of creative thing. Like, you know what you're getting when you hire a Frank Gehry. right? But most of the time it's actually a lot more exchangeable than you think. The reason that you do that is because we are all replaceable things in an industrial system, just like the machines. You have to be replaceable or else the system breaks. You can't get to scale in an industrial world, and so we've learned to specialize. Our education system is dedicated to that idea because we split people up early and you run in one silo, and you think that yours is the best silo. Put these blinders on so that we can run really fast in a straight line. And that's very, very helpful. If you've ever wondered why so many schools that we put kids in, the sort of older model of what education looked like, not this place. This place is really nice. But the public school, K-12 stuff, why it looks like a 19th century factory? It's because it is a 19th century factory, and you are the product. Luckily, we have places like art school, where you're meant to break down some of those barriers, right? But in the industrial space, architects make buildings, which is meant for construction. That's our friend Mies up there. I'm sure you recognize him in the Seagram's building. Charles and Ray Eames, heroes to me. All these people are. You know, absolutely, you will not find better industrial design out there than a Charles and Ray Eames chair. It's unbelievable. And by the way, in my opinion, that's sustainable design because you're never going to throw it out. It's fantastic stuff. So iconic in our culture, there's jokes about it on sitcoms. Frasier had like 4 or 5 jokes on just the fact that he had that chair. You probably don't recognize Alan Kay up there. He's the guy who came up with the desktop metaphor when he was at Xerox PARC. And that became the desktop that we have in Windows and Mac OS. And that's Virgil Abloh up there, rest in peace. Great fashion designer. But the point of this is that industrial designers make products. I don't know what your problem is, but the solution's a chair. Architects, I don't know what your problem is, but you need a new building. Even digital design, it's a bit more flexible because of what it is. Fashion design, like you wind up living in your production channel. Now, designers have superstars in each of their fields who represent the best of the profession. And I'm not trying to discount that at all. These people are great. All these designers care about the human experience their work supports. And we're talking about experience design today. And I bump into this a lot. It's like, well, I'm a designer, I do experiences. You know, I do interiors, you experience the interior. Absolutely. Totally you do. Stand back and look at it, it's beautiful. A really great piece of architecture, you build an emotional connection with it. It has a utility to it. It defends you from the elements. Like there's that feeling when I walk in here and I feel the AC. All of that stuff is, connects with people, and there's an experience there, and you think that through. But you only do it within one specific channel. And that's how far your reach goes in traditional design. But that isn't how we experience the world, is it? The way we experience the world is a lot more rich. We experience a whole bunch of things at once. Let's take a look, and I'm back in the commercial space here because we're talking about retail. This applies to lots of other things too. But I need a vacation. I just got off a flight that was badly delayed and the food sucked, so I ranted about it on Twitter, and someone met me at the gate when I landed and gave me a first-class upgrade for my trip home and access to the lounge for my next trip. By the way, a bunch of airlines can do that. They will listen to you while you're in the air and make it right when you land. They can't do it every time, so they don't advertise it, plus you'll totally abuse it, right? But they use it as an opportunity to build a relationship with you. Well, it's great. If we're the people that just design the lounge, we're not dealing with the whole experience. The value in it is because this whole thing comes together, and it involves service, it involves communications, it involves social media, digital design, and a great built environment. This doesn't discount what the built environment's about. It just means that it's tied into something bigger. Let's deal with retail. I used an app to pay for a product in a store where staff showed me 2 options that I asked for because I saw them online, that I first heard about on social media in a really cute ad that followed me after I watched some content on an influencer's Instagram. Do we design retail if we just do the store? Not anymore. And you all know this because you've all experienced it. You know that this is what it feels like. I'm not going to read all of these. Let's skip workplace. That one's complicated. I don't feel so good. I just received a prescription that was delivered to me in 2 hours from a company that's tied to my insurance that told me which doctor I should see in a nice doctor's office, but she said next time we could just do this online. The experience of healthcare is maybe 30% in a physical environment now. Healthcare is bigger. All of these things are bigger. And the people that we work for, their brands do that whole experience. Alaska Airlines does the upper left. I know the guy that designed that, actually. That experience was designed. Somebody created it. Design can live in the, let's make a building. It can also live in, let's make a complete experience, and that experience builds a better connection with people. That's why I started this thing where it's like, you need to learn about people and you can't just phase that out. The number of times I'm in a room with interior designers and architects where I'm like, okay, who's using this? And they look at me like I'm crazy. It's like, people. Everyone's here. It's like, no, they're not. It's usually a very narrow group of people. Upper left there, the people on the plane, right? You can learn about them, learn what their interests are, learn about what makes them angry. So, hospitality now isn't just a hotel, it's how people have fun, socialize, and travel. Healthcare isn't just a hospital, it's how people get and stay well. Retail isn't just a store, it's how people consider and make a purchase. And workplace isn't just an office, it's how people work together. Notice I'm saying not just an office, it's an office too. It's part of it. Now you might think that the big commonality in all this is technology. That I'm here to say, give you some sort of spiel about how digital connections are changing everything. We're all going to be working from home, and you're all going to get replaced by AI, and all that sort of stuff. And it's not about that actually. The common word in each of these is people. So it's about understanding people, learning about people, building empathy with people, understanding them so that you can create something that's valuable for them. And when you do that, clients make money. And they, which is the reason that they hire you. If you're a retail designer, the reason that they're hiring you is because they want you to make some sort of an experience in an interior that sells stuff. But you do it by creating value, not by manipulating people. We had a discussion about that earlier. That's a fine line, actually. You do it by creating an experience for them that they find value in. People are why we design. People are more important than stuff, and we can't just be in the stuff business anymore. So, while we used to think that planning, architecture, and interiors kind of own the entire experience, like in the old days, like in the 70s when I was a kid, you'd go to the hardware store and say, I need a power tool, I need a drill. And the guy shows you the drills, and you pick the one that you like and you can afford, and then you leave. You pay for it, hopefully. That's the whole shopping journey, and it all happens inside the store. So the people that design the store say, well, we've designed the experience because we own everything. It's all happening inside there. You all know that's not true anymore. Now what happens is I say, well, which drill do I want? What's the right thing for me? What's the right price? I'm probably shopping online. Maybe there's two that I want. I go to Home Depot. I take a look at two of them. I'm informed as a customer. Very different journey. I know right where to go, and I'm only going to look at the things that I've researched. I pick one. I pay for it there. Or maybe I just ordered it online, and it was shipped directly from the store, which actually affects the design of the store too. Or maybe I did click and collect, and I went and picked it up. That messes with the store as well, because you got to figure out how to operationalize that in the store. Right? So the whole programming of the store is completely different. It's not that it's gone away. In fact, it's just as important as ever. But you've got this different function that it has to serve because it's part of a larger ecosystem. And that larger ecosystem kind of looks like this. You got planning, architecture, and interiors, and just out of courtesy for you guys, I put it at the top. Okay? You've got activations, events, things like that, how you bring the place to life. You've got digital experiences that happen in the space, and that's really big. That could be anything from an app all the way up to a great big immersive experience. Services, how you deploy them, how you operationalize people, interacting with people in this space, Brand and communications, data and personalization, which is huge. There's an underlying link in all of this where how do you collect data so that you can personalize an experience? And how do you use that data ethically? Experience design doesn't design any one of those things. I used to design products, which isn't even on this. But experience design is about choreographing all of those things so that they work together. Think about a really crappy experience that you've had in the last little while. Chances are, if it's in a store and it's a crappy experience, it's because two of these things are disconnected. The big one for me is service and digital is disconnected. They don't know anything about you. They look you up and down, you say, hey, do you have this in the store? And they go, no, get it online. I hate that. I came all the way down there, I'm here to buy this thing, Or better yet, on the website it said you have it and you don't, right? How often does that happen? It's the disconnection between those things that makes a mess and immediately it gives you a reason to shop somewhere else. When that happens, your client loses you as a customer. Yikes. That's no good. Now, if you're smart like Alaska Airlines, you'll figure out a way to take that and make it an opportunity to bring them back in. That's just classic retail thinking, but that stuff has to be applied to the design of all of these things so that they work together, and 99.9% of the time they have to work together. The ratio of stuff to non-stuff in this is exactly 1 to 6, or 1 to 5. I don't know if you include XD as stuff, but. So experience design sits at the middle and choreographs all those things. It's strategic. It comes in at a different point in the business cycle as well. Because to have that conversation, you have to be talking strategically with the client. So the program that architects often get as a brief comes from someone who's doing the experience design. So it has to have these fixtures, it has to show this product, it has to have this much space, it has to have an omni-channel area in the front, it has a fulfillment center in the back. All that stuff is coming strategically from experienced designers and the people that they're working with at corporate. So it sort of comes in a bit before. A lot of the time when they teach architecture, I'm not sure if you're taught this way, you might recognize this, schematic or concept, design development, construction documents, and construction administration. If you go to the AIA, those are the standard phases that architects go through. Companies have different versions of this. They say, discover, define, design, deliver, or something. It's always alliteration. It's always 4 Ds or something. It's usually 4 or 5, so you can wrap your head around it. It's never 8. And more we're putting research at the beginning about the market and competition and some vision and programming in at the beginning. So you've got a brief that's being handed to you, and you might be able to push on that a little bit, right? So this is a really, really great way to produce a predictable outcome. So the client says, I've got a program, I want you to make a building, I want you to make a store, a hospital, whatever that is. At the end of it, you get that building. Maybe a little better. Now, that could be a really moving space to look at. It could be a really beautiful space to experience. I'm not trying to discount this, but it's linear and it produces what's in the brief. Client says, I want a logo, you get a logo. And it might be a great logo. It could be the Nike logo could come out of this. Apple logo comes out of a process like this. It's okay, but it's exactly what you asked for at the beginning. But if the client asks for something that they can't define, like for example, I want to engage a new market through a complex web of channels and experiences, which is what shopping actually is now, you get a big fat red fail at the end of this. And the reason is, people are just too damn unpredictable. You can't, no matter how much research you do at the beginning, doesn't matter how much research you do at the beginning of this thing, there's no way you're going to be able to predict every little bit of human behavior over here and all those connections that have to happen between those bubbles. So you need a different process because that stage is going to fail if you apply the regular old linear process to it. That's okay if you want to make a building. This is Mies again. If you come in and you have this sort of moment of genius that creates this fantastic new typology of architecture. This is the first big glass tower in New York. Actually, debatable Lever House across the street, but you can still do that within that linear process, but a lot of this is already prescribed. We know how people use buildings. We have a lot of standards. We have a lot of building codes that tell you how to make one. The site is telling you a lot, right? So you're getting your information from different places. It doesn't have to be as human-centric. So I say that this is a building-centric process, not a human-centric process, because there's no people in it. The whole thing's about making a building. You started with a thing saying, make me a building, and you made them a building. And you did it with standards and codes and things like that on the way through. Industrial designers, software designers, service designers, they've invented a different approach to deal with the unpredictability of human behavior. Those moments where it breaks because you can't anticipate how people are going to use it. That process is actually called agile, and it's where the research never stops and the user's input guides the whole process. So you start with some sort of a brief at the beginning that's usually more like a problem statement than it is a site and this is how many rooms we need in the hotel. Okay? And then right away you build a prototype. You just, this is wrong, but I'm going to build the closest thing that I can and see if it works. And you build it as cheap as you possibly can. And so you do it in like Figma or one of those things for software. We've been known to mock up things out of cardboard, all that kind of stuff. Try it. Just try it really fast. Let it fail when you test it. Learn from the test and figure, is this the right decision or not? Should we go this direction? Let it fall off completely. Let it fail. Kill the program off if it doesn't show any progress. Or you get to a sort of a product release 1.0 after you've refined it by going around and around on the spin cycle here. So you iterate over and over and over again until the thing gets good enough that you can release the very first MVP, or minimum viable product. This is how software is made. This is why you have so many versions of software. And then you keep iterating for future releases, and you never actually leave beta. The version that's actually out there on the market is the one that is going to evolve in the next round. So let's compare these two processes. This is what's known as a waterfall process because it's linear. It goes one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And it's linear and sequential, which is fine for doing some things, but agile, circular, and iterative. Waterfall is based on the designer's intent. How much do designers like to talk about that? My intent, right? It's a big thing. Over here, it's based on user input. We don't know what the solution is. We're counting on our users to tell us. It's terrifying. It's also a lot of fun because you don't have to come up with the best ideas all the time. You're going to watch how people use stuff. We did a furniture line a long time ago, where it's one of the last industrial design things that I did, but it's a good example of this, where we had a truck with a bunch of equipment on it, and we put 10 versions of our furniture system out in different offices. And we drove around in the truck, and people would give us feedback on something. It's like, oh, you don't like that piece? Okay, no problem. Take it around, cut it down, drill a hole in it, you know, whatever. I think we had to take it back to the office to weld it, I think, if we did that. But, you know, we bring this thing back, and it's basically smoking, you know, because it's still hot from the machining. And you take it in, you pop it in. It's like, is that better? Yeah, that's better. Okay, use it for a week. Tell me what you think later. And you just ran around, and gradually the product evolved based on the user feedback. If I had to come up with the end product in one go, I never would have come up with it. I never would have developed it. And it was a really different thing. It was a kind of crazy cockpit thing. So that's how this works when you're dealing in a world of service, when you're dealing in a world of altering human behavior. Whenever you're messing around with human behavior, you got to live over here to get it right and listen to their opinions, because I guarantee that anything that you dream up in one shot's wrong. One thing that I like in this is that product-centric versus human-centric. I talked about that. Top-down versus participatory. Old-school design firms. The principal has an idea, and everyone works till, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning producing the drawings for it. And he comes in and goes, no, that's not it. I said make it red, you know, whatever. There are still places like that. There are. And they do that process, and it's fine. This over here, you can't be an asshole. You can't afford to. Because people just leave, and you need their input. And so there's a whole culture difference around these two things. Over here looks, you know, on its extremes, looks a lot more like a playroom. And the designer's more like a facilitator than the big visionary. The designer takes the role of having a conversation with people. This is the Microsoft mouse, which at the time was the #1 selling mouse of all time. This is by IDEO. I didn't do this. I wish I did. I was 19 or something when it came out. I think it's still #1, actually. So that's the mouse, the real one. All these are blocks of foam that have been taken down with sandpaper and carved to feel like a mouse. And they try it. They weighted some of them down. They put weight in it. This is IDEO did this. Or maybe it was Frog. It's one of them. It's IDEO or Frog. And you could test it out and see how it feels. And you notice that all of them up there suck a little bit more than the real one. Like the one at the bottom is definitely the best choice, right? you'd never get to that one right out of the gate. You wouldn't just draw that. You can't. You can't just be the person that does that. And doing it on a sketchpad won't get you there. I think you could rule out probably 2/3 of these on a sketchpad, honestly. You could probably just sketch it and say, no, that's a dumb one. Like that sort of funny pyramid-looking one up at the top or whatever. You know, aren't you glad mice didn't stop there? Could you imagine? It's like, no, here's your mouse, you know. It's about that sort of ergonomics. And it's a huge portion of, like, people think of ergonomics as being something where it's like my physical interaction with this chair, that's ergonomics. And actually, a huge portion of it is sort of cognitive. Like, what do you think about it? Do you understand it? Does it make sense? That's why one button's bigger than the other button on the mouse. See that? And there's actually a little bump in between them so you can sense where that thing is. And another side of it's emotional. Like, does it have a positive association for you? And you guys play in that space all the time. You're always thinking about the associations. Do people understand this kind of thing? So bringing that thinking to it is really important. The process would have looked like that. This is as best I could map it out by the similarities of different mice on there. I don't really know what order it was, but that's how many iterations it took through that cycle of testing. When I say rapid testing, I mean really rapid. Like, you know, it could be minutes. So let's get into a couple of examples of how this applies into the built environment. This is a project, financial industry project for a company called Ponce Bank, really great little community bank in New York. This is the before shot, okay? We didn't design this. Sort of 1970s banking model, bulletproof glass in front of the tellers, big lineup out the door, everything's based on paper, lots of like elderly people in there who want to use their passbook. You stuff it under the glass and then, you know, remember the old dot matrix printers? You guys probably don't remember those too well. You know, right? They had all that. But they were really important as a community bank. Like, people really loved this bank. And they were really good about loaning to people who weren't, you know, in the total top tax bracket. You know, they wanted to help build local community businesses and things. So where they came to with us was that new technology that had been available, sort of white labeled, made it possible to transform the experience and get it into something that was a lot more seamless and a lot more effortless. But it meant adopting a whole bunch of new digital technology all at once. And you know, whenever that happens, it's going to screw up, right? Like, there's no way that you're just going to take this whole thing, plug it in one day, and you have a new bank. Like, but that's how they sell it to you. So there's a problem there because the IT guys are always, they're never really too sure what's going to happen when you deploy it all. They really don't know. And then the big thing is, how do the people that are there, the people that are doing the service, how do they interact with customers so they're not tripping over each other with all this new tech? How many people on the floors should there be? How can we create a great experience for the staff? Whenever you create great staff experience, by the way, you create great customer experience. Every time. Okay? So let's create a great experience for them and support them. And then finally, how do we do this in a way where we're not alienating the older clients? There was a big worry that you'd wind up with older clients just walking away from this because it's just like, oh, it's too complicated, it's too technological, whatever. And there's that kind of crazy assumption. It's just kind of like, you know, anyone over 45 doesn't know how to use an iPhone. I'm 53. I know how to use an iPhone. I had a computer on my desk all the time. So there's this kind of assumption that happens where it's just like, oh, those older folks, you know. So how do we get this right? So we started with a bunch of co-creation workshops with leadership, staff and managers. And so in this picture, there's the CEO of the bank. There's the chief marketing officer, who also is really great at customer experience. His name's Steve. He's become a friend of mine in this process. We have a teller. We have someone from operations, marketing. We have a few managers in there. There were members of the board were in there. And we all work together to say, okay, what do we want this thing to be in the future? And the idea is that instead of stuffing all these new digital tools at the customer, what if we use them to empower the staff to deliver more personalized service? Because then the data's in their hands, and you're taking all that burden away from the customer. And actually, luxury brands do this a lot. So, okay. Then what we did was we took a bank branch that had been gutted, but it was still licensed. Okay, they happened to have one of these. And we got all of the staff together, and it's a small enough bank that we could actually get all the staff together in different sessions, and we co-created the future state journeys that people experience when they're in this space. What that means is, okay, I come in the door, I'm greeted a certain way, I'm triaged over to here because I'm asking for a loan. I sit down in a really nice space that's like a boardroom, so I have some privacy, but it's still open and bright. Someone comes in, brings me a coffee, I sit down, and somebody presents loan options that would be relevant to me because they know me. You know, that sort of story, developing that story, but getting it down to the point where you're seeing everything the staff are doing too. And you're actually able to pull out what's called business requirements. That's all the stuff that the business has to do to make this real. Okay? So that's everything from the coffee maker to the boardroom to the, you know, whatever digital thing is running on their iPad. So we map all that out together, and since this was an empty space, we mocked up what we thought the bank would look like, knowing it was wrong, and built some furniture out of plywood, and got some stuff from IKEA, made a bunch of stuff out of cardboard, and kept moving it around until it felt right. And we would role play all of these journeys until we thought that they were ready for prime time. We also deployed all of the digital stuff in this space so we could see where it breaks. And boy, did it break. Always does, because the IT guys are lying. So in here, and there's actually a reason for that. There's a big reason for that. They get the biggest to-do list of anybody in the company, always, always. And it's a nightmare. Like, hey, how about a Salesforce integration? You know, that kind of thing. Anyway, so we wound up with this sort of bank humming along where we were able to accommodate the gaps in the digital experience using the staff. In the process of this, we trained up all the staff to do everything in the bank, which meant that you no longer had tiers of people that were sort of like the greeter and the teller and the manager and the loan officer. Basically, everybody could do anything, and they were all Ponce bankers. This is Ponce Bank, which empowered them, and they loved it. Like, they felt like they really owned this because they created it. See what I mean? I never would have gotten this right the first time. If I came in with a magic wand and said, okay, here's your new experience, bye, you know, whole thing would die, right? It had to come from them. And then, for fun, since we iterated on it with staff and we were all happy about it, we opened the doors to the bank while it was still all made out of cardboard, bolted all the computers and all the bank machines down, and operated as a bank for about a month, and got feedback from clients. I'm about to show you my favorite picture of my portfolio. That is an elderly woman, which is exactly the segment that the manager was sure would hate any digitized experience. And she's standing on her tiptoes to give us a really high customer effort score. So customer effort score is one of the things you can measure in an environment to say, you know, are you going to like this? Actually, effort is a really good predictor of loyalty. If you have to exert a lot of effort, it's very likely you'll go somewhere else. Think about it the next time you fly United. You'll think about other places to fly. Like, this is hope nobody here worked for United. This is like that to me is gold. And by the way, the only reason, talk about human behavior, the only reason that it spreads out and starts going low is because people didn't want their stickers to overlap. So if I was doing this again, I would have put a couple and overlapped them at the top, because all those scores actually were meant to be way up at the top. We collected all sorts of data, customer satisfaction, effort, all sorts of things from it. And the service in the interior space evolved through, it was a 6-week test, that's right. Started getting feedback like this because you could write on all the tables and things, which is kind of fun. And then in the end of this, we wound up with any Ponce banker being able to provide any service anywhere in the bank without any glass barriers. Wait times have been greatly reduced or eliminated. All of the teller stations are all broken up, so it's a lot easier to access. Existing customers rated the new experience very highly, often saying it was more personal. And the reason for that was because we weren't forcing them to write everything on paper. We were doing more work for them, but we were doing it with the digital tools on the staff side. I love that. The little things you learn, like we thought that we wanted to make all of our tables counter height, like a kitchen counter. Well, first time we tried that, a woman came in on her walker, parked it off on one side and started leaning on it like this. We're like, oh, what if we raised it? Like that. It's high bar height, like around 50 inches. And 40, anyway. And so we jacked it up on the sawhorses, and people started doing this. It was amazing to watch. It was so easy. Dealing with your user. There's no way I would have come up with that. The operations of the bank are now almost 100% digital. Ponce Bank won the Top Innovator Award from the Future Branches Conference. And we're rolling out the bank now with this going to inform the interior. So it's not that the interior goes away. There's a lot of banks right now that are like, what's the future of the branch? You know, should this whole thing be in your app? And it's like, there's still going to be branches. There's still going to be reasons for branches to happen. We're still going to design them. They're just going to be different. And they have to go through a process like this to be able to be right. If you just make something based on your stereotypes, you know it's going to be off base. How am I doing on time? Okay. So we talk a lot about this idea of moonshots. You hear that term in design a lot. It's like, oh, we're going for a moonshot, big ideas. And that happens in workshops all the time. People on whiteboards, it's like, oh, this is going to be our moonshot. You know, somebody even draws a little moon or something. You hear that a lot. Well, the way to get to a moonshot is to blow up a lot of rockets. Elon Musk knows this. He's blown up a bunch. The key is, don't put anyone on them when you do it. So prototypes, the essence for prototypes is to do it in a way that isn't that a beautiful picture, by the way? I think that is a SpaceX rocket. The trick with prototypes is you do it in a high-risk environment where it's like 50% sure this thing could kill someone, you know? And then do it in a place where it's a low blast radius, so it doesn't create any harm. You're messing with things that can really mess with a brand. You can really change people's perceptions of a brand if you just deploy it too fast. And if you make a big change, the riskier it gets. So you do it in a controlled environment. We do a lot in a lab environment. So for example, we did a play space for kids, a small play space. And we got 100 kids and 20 different play points, like everything you could ever want, like things you could jump up and down on, and you know, the kind of stuff, you've seen these things around, right? And create this playground, put it together, get the stuff that the kids like, put it in one space, and see what they do. All the parents are there, you get the feedback. You do that in a lab, though. You do it in a place where you can watch it, you can be careful with it, right? And before we did that, we did cardboard mock-ups and saw, is that about right? Does that feel like the right scale? And then we did a plywood mock-up and we showed it to a kid, but they didn't actually play with it. It's like, do you like this? Kind of thing. And we made sure it was as safe as it could be, and then we put it in a lab, and you take it out of the lab and you put it and you do it in the actual environment. So these things evolve, and they're better and better every time you do it. And by the way, my favorite play points didn't make it into the final one. Why? Because I was wrong. And the user told me about what the thing needed to be. That was a really fun project, actually. Quote from Laurie Anderson. Y'all know who Laurie Anderson is? Look her up. She's a composer, artist, violinist, performance artist. The problem with prototypes is they don't always work. I love that. The point of this is to break something and learn from it. Much more fun than sweating it out, trying to come up with a perfect idea. Get the input from the user and from the environment, test it out, see whether it fails. This is why every consultancy out there has bought a small experience design group. Every major consultancy, these aren't architecture firms on the right, those are consultancies like Deloitte, Ernst & Young, McKinsey, they have hundreds of thousands of people. And the design firms are on the left. And those are all experience design firms. And they do the kind of work that I'm talking about because it plugs into corporate strategy. You deliver the experience to bring your business to life. And retail is the place where that can happen. And retail is the place, by the way, where you can collect really good analytics on it as you go. There's not very many that can actually do that. Like, we've done a lot of work in workplace. It's awesome, but it takes a long time for people to hate workplace so much that they quit. You know, oh, the coffee sucks here, I quit, I'm done. No, that doesn't happen, right? So the stuff that you're going to measure is so subtle, it's very difficult. Whereas in retail, it turns up in dollars and cents right away. There's a few other places where that happens. Transit, we did a big transit project. I don't just work in retail, by the way. We did a project with City of Amsterdam Transit. It's an app to be able to help you navigate the transit system, and it's gamified with incentives in it, and you can sort of keep a bunch of money from your employer if you walk to work and things like that, to try to get you to use more carbon neutral means of transit. That kind of thing you can start picking up information on really quickly. The key is to measure your success right out of the gate. It drives me crazy when I bump into retail design firms that have no idea whether or not their store was successful. You can see it when they still use it in their portfolio. It's like, that store closed. It did terribly. And it's like, yeah, but look at the finish. I mean, this facade, oh, beautiful. God, I hate that. Or there's something that's a success and they don't know. I found out today a store that somebody worked on who I know. It's like, oh yeah, we produced that for half the price of the earlier ones and it's 60% increase in accessory sales. It's like, what? Get that on a t-shirt. That's the stuff that the clients actually understand. Bill Buxton, another hero of mine. I showed you the Eameses earlier and people like that. He's in that league. He was a computer scientist at Microsoft. Before that, he was at Alias Wavefront. Did a whole bunch of the stuff that you see now in computer animation. Created the interface for that. Expert in music, actually. The age of the Renaissance individual is long over, but not of the Renaissance team. This is kind of a Renaissance man. Okay, he was a bit later, and yeah, it's kind of a shaky concept, but the grand, brilliant composer who has a direct line to God, who creates this stuff, and we have no idea how he got it. Oh my God, it's brilliant. Like, you're never going to do better than this. It's fantastic. He's like just that far away from being a deity, And he writes it down on paper, and then that goes to a conductor, and that conductor is leading an army of people to produce this thing. And now it's in the conductor's mind, and the conductor's a genius, and that person's going to bestow the vision on down. It's very top down, right? Same way you run an army, right? Same way you run a church, by the way. Pope's at the top, goes all the way down, fans out into all the different layers of it. I mean, it works, it's fine, but it's not that, right? Miles Davis, Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, Red Garland, Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb, and Herbie Hancock a little bit later on. That's a Renaissance team. It's not that there isn't a leader of it. Miles Davis was the leader. All of them are contributing ideas, and they're feeding off each other, and it's a little bit different every time. They're experts that come in together from different disciplines, right? And so the way that it looks for us is that I don't come in with the big vision and say, build that. I have some ideas. The way it works is we get a psychologist. I have one on my team. We have somebody who's great at data analytics. She's amazing. We've got someone with a background in education and UX design. It's amazing. She used to teach K-12. And you build that team around the kind of experts that you need, graphic designers, architects. Get that group together so that they're contributing as more like a band would, where they're equals. And they can work together. And then I don't have to come up with all the ideas, because if I did, it would be wrong. Because it's just too complicated. And then you get the users in. Then you get the stakeholders in. You co-create with them so that they feel ownership of it, and you create something that you know is on target for what they're looking for. And I guarantee it's going to be different than what you think. The lone genius versus the collective, the Renaissance man versus the Renaissance team. In this environment, the designer becomes more like a facilitator, a synthesizer, or a producer. Star equity becomes team equity. The Renaissance man becomes a Renaissance team. It goes from the individual to the collective. It goes from top down to distributed. It goes from low risk to embracing risk. Blow up rockets. You just do it in low impact scenarios. And going from linear to distributed in that process that I showed you before. That's where design's going. I am so encouraged whenever I meet young people, because this is endemic to you guys and it wasn't to me. I had to learn it. I learned design the other way and took 10 years trying to figure out how not to do that anymore. And then I stopped designing chairs and started designing experiences. What I found is that younger people, no matter what program they're in, they tend to be more likely to adopt this other way of thinking about design. I don't know why that is. Education's probably gotten better. We're communicating between disciplines more. I know they're teaching some of this in high school now. So I have great hope for where things are going every time I do one of these things. Stealing this quote from John Cage, another musician. I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of the old ones. Thank you very much.
All right, we have some time for a few questions. Any questions for Paul?
Tomatoes? You can throw tomatoes? Yeah, you were first.
So, what would be your advice for how we should implement this strategy as, you say young people coming into new architecture firms where we're kind of like, I don't want to say like bottom of the totem pole, but could we come in and say like, hey, like I have an idea, let's rent a warehouse and like set up a prototype. Like, how would you go about that type of thing?
Honestly, actually, John? John and I work together. It's interesting because all firms work a little bit differently. I found when I came into Arcadis, it was called CRTKL at the time. There were groups of people that were really open to change and others that were a little bit more conservative about stuff, and that's okay. The difference for me, though, was I was coming in at a senior enough level that I had a relationship with the client. So I could speak to the client about how to do it. So to get that, to that point, you kind of need to be in a place where you can affect the original project plan. You need to be in a place where you're having a conversation with people about how to crack the nut on a complex project. In retail, you're lucky because the teams tend to be fairly small. You're not dealing with hundreds of people, and you need to get the ear of somebody that seems to be open for it, so that that is getting embedded in the way that the project's proposed. Because once the project's proposed and the fees locked down, you're not going to go in there and say, hey, can we rent a warehouse, right? The other one is get yourself on a project team with a really, really smart client. So there's some firms that I've dealt with that are a little behind the times, and then there's others that are quite a bit ahead that embrace this kind of stuff that I'm talking about, and they push it on us. They're kind of like, okay, this is the process we're taking. You're designing a store, right? Okay, well, let's think through the experience. Let's mock this up. And so how you navigate that firm internally has to do with the principals and people like that that you're connected with, the teams that you're building, and the clients that you're engaged with. I don't have an easy answer for you as far as being able to walk in and just sort of say, hey guys, I've got a great idea. There's a bit of navigation you need to do in there to be able to make it work, but we're seeing change happen everywhere. And the nice thing about it is that the language from this sells to the clients because they're sort of thinking about it already. I guarantee you every retailer's thought about customer experience. Every healthcare provider has thought about patient experience. So don't be the guy that starts the conversation with drywall, right? Start with something that's about, how do we build your business? How do we create a better experience for your customers? How do we increase your staff retention? All the human stuff, right? Yeah.
Has there been a project that really made you change your perspective on experience design?
Anything recent? My favorite is probably, there's a project that I didn't show you here because of time. We worked with Petco. I'm a big animal lover. Got a dog, her name's Zed. Zed is how Canadians say the letter Z, if you're wondering where that came from. That was fun because they wanted to really transform their whole brand and go from a commodified store in the suburbs that sells 60-pound bags of dog food and you have to haul it out to your car, to being an omni-channel hub that sells, you know what omni-channel is, right? That sells into a whole neighborhood and provides all the services you need to be a great pet parent, including health and wellness, being a real expert in food. They made some big scary moves. They got rid of all of their heavily processed food. They upped their game in that. They upped their game in nutrition. And so we came in at a point where they wanted to transform all of that, and we did a prototype store that became their #1 store in the network. Yeah, and it was amazing. And we were partnered with a great interiors team that came with us for the whole journey, and we built the prototypes together, and they influenced it, and they had fun with it, and yes.
I have a question related to that.
Yeah.
In that project, I'm assuming that you have two clients. You have the pet parents and the pets, because in that place, the pets are.
Yep.
Did you take into account that?
Oh yeah. We had some real fun with that. The lighting in the space is tuned to the circadian rhythms of the pets. We had a Petco has some real experts, as you can imagine. Not just vets, but animal behaviorists and stuff like that. And we went through with them and did an audit on everything we did. We tested it with a pet, so we built cardboard models, like I showed you. In this great big space, we built all the sort of real customer-facing stuff, like the checkout counter and the vet check-in, and I think we did the grooming studio. And then we brought in a dog. The dog name was Gouda, and we tested. We had about 200 journeys there because it's so complicated, and we tested everything with a dog in the cardboard environment, and it's amazing what happens. And it's amazing what happens to the humans when they have a dog.
It's
Yeah, your whole field of view when you're dealing with a pet is completely different, especially if it's a big pet, you know, like a husky or something. You're getting dragged around in the store because they're smelling all this stuff and things like that. And meanwhile, somebody's there kind of like, can we get them to shop on their app? And I'm like, no. You know, that other hen should be carrying stuff around in the basket, right? And so the like just basic stuff like that. We also, that was probably one of the more complicated ones that I'd done where we worked with the entire cross-functional team. So that means IT, digital design, communications, research. They had a killer research team. We do too. Actually, we have a really great research team in-house. But there was this great team there in Petco that actually were able to give us really great insights. So we could go a long way with it. And then we got all of them together and said, this is this enormous matrix, 200 journeys listed down here, 200 business requirements up here, this enormous grid of dots showing, and if you pull one dot off, the whole store unravels. So we have to put our arms together and say, 6 months from now, that's going to be the store. And we got everybody to collaborate. And that's not all me, that's them. Like, they're just a really good team. And it was, part of it is their leadership is really good. Like, they're a great company. And the end result was something that, you know, I'm really proud of.
One last question.
Yeah. One more? Oh, sorry. Did I overstep there? Yeah.
Yeah, just a question. Well, thank you so much for the great lecture you gave us. Very, very interesting.
Pleasure.
I really like the collaboration of the team all working on the project. I think the question I have was for maybe a little bit specific about the mock-up that you had. And sort of, who was testing that? Was it like the random participants or somebody from the team?
Really good question.
Yeah, it was testing.
Really good question. There's a whole best practice for this. What he's asked is, when we're doing mock-ups, where do you get the people to try it? So usually what happens is you start with a very limited, first of all, it depends how risky it is. If you're doing something that people might hate, right, or might take exactly the wrong message away from. I'm not talking about risky as in safety. We never put anybody's safety in harm's way, by the way, we don't. But these prototypes are meant to sort of like have people come up and react to them. What do you do with it? And so you start usually just with people around. Like, hey, do you like this? Does this work? Is this, you know, it's good? And then just sort of get a feel for it. That's not scientific though, because you haven't picked people from a representative sample. The next you would do is in a lab, and you do mock-ups that are good enough resolution that you're testing the right thing. So you know what you're going to learn from it, right? So in the case of the Ponce Bank, we were interested in the top surface, its position in space, how big it is, you know, what affordances are attached to it. You know the term affordance? Yeah, you got that one? Okay, good. Good job. And so we're interested in that. We don't care if it's a sawhorse underneath, right? So just go to Home Depot, buy some sawhorses, plunk them underneath. It could be cheap, right? So you're always trying to do it as cheap as you can, but a high enough resolution that you're testing the bit that you're interested in. Then you're probably going to want to be in a position where you get what's called a panel of people, where you source people that are in the kind of user group that you're interested in. This is super important if you're dealing with anything involving people with different kind of levels of physical ability or neurodiversity or things like that. It's absolutely important. It's amazing, amazing what they'll teach you when you're in that situation. But same thing with just customers. Kids, I mean, that example that I gave you earlier for that client that remained nameless and I couldn't provide very much detail on, that was a project where we got kids in, which is insane. Like, there's lots of actors that's like, I hate working with kids. I love it because it's like completely unpredictable. It's amazing how they break stuff. We did like they really know how to break stuff. So that's when you do a panel, and then once you've got it in a controlled space and you're happy with it, then you do a higher resolution one, like a production prototype that looks pretty much like the real thing. It can still be foam core, it can still be printing and stuff like that. The Petco stuff, a lot of it was printing, and you pilot it. And you do that in a real space, and you see how it changes things. I'm a really big fan of like not getting too caught up in this though. Like that walkie-talkie thing with the guy that went out to the street, and that's a prototype. We just didn't have to build any fixtures for it. So if you're trying to change people's behavior, you can do it with a walkie-talkie and a camera and moving some existing fixtures around, see what happens. You don't have to sort of say, okay, well, that's 2 months of millwork, you know. You could just, you could change things really quickly and see how people react to it and, you know, make it very, very light. And you can learn a lot, right? Again, I never would have come up with that if I had to do it by myself. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to give you a small souvenir.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Thank you very much. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. And I'll be here for a minute or two more if you want to come down and say hi or talk about anything. Thanks a lot. Thanks to the AV guys.
Thank you.